He was a Marine, and Marines don't forget. They don't forgive. They don't let wounds close when the blood is still fresh. He lived his life by discipline, forged in fire, trained to be sharper than steel, harder than stone, but all that discipline meant nothing the night his wife came home broken, her spirit crushed, her eyes empty in a way he had never seen before. She whispered the unthinkable, and his world tilted into a darkness he could not come back from. She told him what they did to her, the men who were supposed to protect and serve, not strangers, not criminals in the shadows, police officers, men with badges, men who carried the law on their hips and the smugness of untouchable power in their smiles. They had cornered her, violated her, ripped her soul apart, and then walked away as if she were nothing. They wore their uniforms the next day, smiled at their neighbors, shook hands with kids, and acted like guardians of peace, but to him they were monsters. That night he held her while she cried, but inside he was not crying. Inside he was silent. A storm had begun to rise, and it would not be stopped. He had seen war. He had seen death. He knew what men were capable of, and now that darkness had walked into his own home. The next morning he went to the station, tried to file a report. He told himself maybe the system would work, maybe justice would prevail, but the station was cold, the officers were colder, and the looks on their faces told him everything. They knew, they all knew, the walls of that building were built to protect their own, and his wife's pain was just another secret to be buried. His words vanished into silence, his pleas ignored, and the case was dismissed before it even began. That was the moment something inside him snapped. Justice would not come through the courts. Justice would not wear a robe or carry a gavel. Justice would come through him and him alone. He was a Marine, and Marines know how to wait. They know how to plan. They know how to kill. So he disappeared into the background of life, but not in his heart. To the world, he looked like a man moving forward, a man healing, but inside, he was sharpening his rage into a blade. He started digging. He followed names, records, shifts. He built files thicker than any detective's. He memorized their addresses, their habits, their families, their vices. He wasn't reckless, he was precise, and precision was something he had mastered long ago. The first year was nothing but patience. He learned who was always drunk on Thursday nights, who gambled too much, who cheated on their wives. He cataloged every weakness, and when his wife asked why he was awake at 3 a.m, why he stared at maps, why he kept a locked notebook under his desk, he simply said he couldn't sleep. She never pressed, maybe because she already knew. The second year, he started testing his own ability to move unseen. He followed them without being noticed. He trailed their cars, sat in corners of bars where they drank, watched them laugh with the arrogance of men who thought they were untouchable. He began to think of them not as men but as targets. They were no longer cops, they were no longer human, they were objectives. By the third year, he was ready. He chose the first one carefully. A man who lived alone, no family, no close friends. A man who drank himself to sleep and carried himself like a bully with a badge. He waited for the night the man stumbled home from the bar, unlocked his door, and collapsed on the couch. That's when he slipped inside. Silent, controlled, deliberate. When the man woke up, it wasn't to an intruder, it was to judgment. The Marine stood over him, calm, his eyes colder than ice, his voice low. No shouting, no rage, just certainty. The man barely had time to beg before it was over. The city wrote it off as another unsolved death. But for him, it was the beginning. The fourth year was dedicated to the others. He didn't rush. Each one was an operation. He scouted, planned, and executed with military precision. He was not sloppy. He was not cruel. He did not torture them. He didn't need to. Death was enough. What mattered was the message that no badge could protect them now, that someone out there was stripping them of the shield they thought was armor. And still, the system didn't see it. They didn't connect the dots. Or maybe they didn't want to. Maybe deep down some of them knew what these men had done and quietly approved of the reckoning. By the 5th year, the list was shorter. Each name crossed out was another step closer to peace for his wife, even though she never asked for this. She had begged him, at first, to let it go, to try to move forward, but she stopped asking when she saw the fire in his eyes. She stopped because she knew he was already gone down this path, and nothing she said would bring him back. The last man was different. He had built a family. He had kids. He smiled in photographs. To the world, he looked like a good man. But to the Marine, he was the worst of them all. The one who had smiled the brightest while hiding his evil the deepest. He watched him for months, not out of hesitation, but out of respect for the gravity of ending it here. When the day came, he didn't take him in the dark of night. He confronted him face to face. No shadows, no silence. Just two men standing in a room, one armed with arrogance, the other armed with justice. The man tried to plead. He tried to say he had changed. He tried to say it was in the past, but the Marine knew better. There are some sins that time doesn't erase, and some debts that can only be paid one way, and so the final name was crossed off the list. When it was all over, the Marine didn't run. He didn't hide. He sat in his living room, the weight of 5 years pressing down on him, the silence almost deafening. His wife sat across from him, her eyes full of tears, but this time, not from fear. It wasn't relief either. It was something more complicated. She didn't thank him. She didn't condemn him. She just looked at him as if trying to see the man he once was. And maybe that man was gone. Maybe the Marine who had once believed in the system had died the night she came home broken. What sat in his chair now was someone else. A man forged in pain, who had carried out his mission with unwavering resolve. The world never knew the full truth. Newspapers printed stories about mysterious deaths. Whispers floated through the department. Rumors spread like wildfire. But no one could prove anything. No evidence, no fingerprints, just silence. And in that silence, his story lived on. To some, he was a criminal. To others, a hero. To himself, he was simply a man who did what had to be done. Years later, when he looked back, he didn't feel pride, he didn't feel joy, he didn't even feel peace. What he felt was finality, a mission complete, and for a Marine, that was enough. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come with a badge. Sometimes justice doesn't sit behind a desk in a courtroom. Sometimes justice is a man who refuses to let evil win, who refuses to let silence cover the truth, who refuses to let the people he loves be destroyed without consequence. And though the city moved on, though new headlines replaced the old, though people forgot the names of the men who once thought themselves untouchable, their end remained a shadow on the walls of justice, a warning whispered in silence. That sometimes when the law fails, the soldier rises, and when he does, there is nowhere to hide.